All right, welcome everybody. My name is Mary Bergman and I am the Executive Director of the Nantucket Preservation Trust. And tonight's program is a collaboration between the Nantucket Historical Association, who's hosting this, the Nantucket Atheneum, the Nantucket Preservation Trust, and is co-sponsored by Housing Nantucket and the Museum of African American History, Boston and Nantucket. So it's a big group effort. And tonight we're going to hear from three panelists, Betsy Tyler, Amelia Holmes, and Lincoln Thurber. And then after we hear a little bit about house research and house history projects and how they go about them and what wonderful resources there are available to the Nantucket community, both in person and online, then we'll have a Q&A session. So if you have questions at all throughout the evening, go ahead and put them in the Q&A and I'll be moderating those. So I'm so happy to have you all with us tonight. I'd like to introduce you to the folks we'll be hearing from. Betsy Tyler is a Nantucket Historical Association Research Fellow and served as the inaugural Obed Macy Research Chair. She holds an MLS in Library Science from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. Tyler's knowledge of notable Nantucket women is extensive, as evidenced by the biographies she's written alongside Susan Boardman's embroidered narratives in Sometimes Think of Me, Notable Nantucket Women Through the Centuries. Her biography on Nantucket whaling wife Susan Veeder, A Thousand Leagues of Blue, The Pacific Whaling Voyages of Charles and Susan Veeder of Nantucket, was published by the NHA in 2019. She's currently researching Phoebe Folger Coleman, and she's written numerous house history books for the Nantucket Preservation Trust and researched a lot of the markers that you see around the island telling you who lived there. Amelia Holmes is the Nantucket Historical Association's Director of Collections and Research Services. She holds a Master of Library Science from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. She's an enthusiastic generalist and provides leadership for the Nantucket Historical Association's museum and library collections and research programs. Lincoln Thurber is the Nantucket Atheneum's head reference librarian, where he also oversees special collections, special archives, and public access technology. He holds a Master of Library and Information Science from Simmons College. Thank you so much for spending part of your evening with us tonight. Media sponsorship for this evening's event is generously provided by Novation Media. And I wanted to also thank thank you for the support of the many island organizations that mentioned up at the top, the NHA, the NPT, the Atheneum, Housing Nantucket, and the Museum of African American History, Boston and Nantucket. There will be another research workshop coming up that the NHA is hosting on February 25th, a workshop for beginners on the basics of genealogy and archival research. So you can learn more about that on the NHA's website. And now I'll be turning it over to Betsy.
Welcome, everybody. I hope we have a lot of invisible people out there listening. I love doing house research. It's one of my favorite things to do on Nantucket. And it's very much like doing your family genealogy because you have to start with what you know about yourself and your parents and grandparents. And you sort of do the same thing when you're looking at a house that you want to know more about. There's a lot of secondary information out there, a lot of books, a lot of articles written about houses. But I always like to start at the very beginning with some very basic online resources that you can all use and show you the steps to sort of begin the process of researching any house that you're interested in. The house that we're looking at tonight is 27 York Street, the Higginbotham House. Most of you probably know where it is. It's right next to the African Meeting House, and it's part of that museum complex. So I'm going to show you how I get started. And what I do first thing is look at the town's GIS map to show me the neighborhood, to show me the outline of the house, and to give me some information that will get me started. So I'm going to show you how to do that right now. And you can go to the GIS website simply by going to Google and typing in Nantucket GIS map, and it will take you right there. So here we go. This is a GIS map, and it shows you the island of Nantucket right there. And all you have to do is type in the property search box on the top left, you can type in the address of any house that you're interested in. So I'm just going to type in 27 York. And, you know, it's a good idea not to type in the word street, because then you will find nothing, because the way it's been entered into the system is 27 York ST. And if you put in street, it will say, sorry, can't find anything. So I'm going to type this in and hit the search button. And there's 27 York Street. You see it on the right. And if you click on that, it will take you right to the house, which is outlined here. And then if you can either click on that square, or you can go over here to property record card and pull up this information about 27 York Street. So this is just a great place to start, because it tells you the assessment of the property if you're interested. But what we're interested in for studying house histories is this list of ownership history, because the only way to really find out everything you want to know about a house is to do the deed research, to look at the current deed and then the deed before that and trace it back. And hopefully along the way, you can discover when the house was built and who lived there, and other interesting things about the property. So you'll see here that the earliest deed that's listed is book 145, page 227. And so we're going to go look that deed up in just a second. But also on this GIS map, you can see that the year built here says 1840. I would just warn you to take those year built dates with a grain of salt, because there's no indication where that information came from, and a lot of times those dates are not accurate. But this will tell you that the house is the style of the house, it's an antique. Often there's a photograph of the house here. There's a little drawing on this particular one. And it gives you information about, you know, the architecture of the house, how it's made, what the square footage is, all that kind of stuff. So it's a great place to get started. So once you've looked at this and you say, okay, I want to look at the deeds. So we're going to leave this page and hopefully go to the Registry of Deeds page, where I can show you how to do a quick deed search. So this is, and to get to this particular website, you can just type Mass Land Records into search, or masslandrecords.com. It takes you to this page, and you'll see that there's Jennifer, our Register of Deeds. The staff at the Registry of Deeds is really very helpful and very knowledgeable. And you can actually visit there now and do research. They have 2 appointments a day, but you can do a lot online. Not all the deeds have been digitized, but they are digitized back to about 1935, somewhere around there. So you can get a good start. And the way you do that, it's the default setting here is to type in a person's name. And you can have a lot of fun looking up your neighbor's property, your property, any house you're interested in. But over here, you see search criteria. You go to book search, and it was book 145, I believe, page 227. And you do a little search, brings up the deed, and you will see a lot of information here. The date of the deed's 1974, tells you who the grantor and grantee are. And you can also take a look at that deed. And you can make this bigger, but what you're looking for when you have the deed to the property, you want to look at the boundaries, north, south, east, and west, so that each time you look at a deed, you confirm those boundaries. But you want to look at, to see if there's a reference to a previous deed. And in a perfect world, each deed would lead you to the previous deed, and you could just keep going back until your deed no longer is talking about a dwelling, but it says there's a transfer of land. So you know your house was built sometime between the date of the deed that transfers land and the date of the deed that transfers a building. So in doing this particular deed research for the Higginbotham House, we're able to go back online to a couple more deeds. This refers you to a previous deed and then one before that. But then, you get back to the point where the deeds are not digitized. And what's really unique about Nantucket and what's really pretty wonderful is that the Registry of Deeds office in the town building has contemporary copies of all the property transactions that have occurred on this island since 1659. And that's an incredible resource. And what that means is that when someone like Josiah Coleman bought a house in 1820 from Tom Coffin, he had a deed, and he took his handwritten deed down to the register, who made a copy of that deed at that time, wrote it out by hand in a ledger book. And those ledger books are all there, and they are easily accessible, and they contain so much great information. So that's the fun part. You learn who lived in the house that you're interested in over the years, and you sometimes learn their occupations. You learn about family members if a house is inherited, and it's a fun thing to do. It's not always simple. Sometimes you get stuck and then you just call a professional, but it is really an exciting process because there's so much to learn about Nantucket houses and neighborhoods. So I'm going to leave this site, and I hope you'll all explore these. And I'm going to tell you about one more online resource that I always use. And I start with the GIS map, I go to the deeds, and then I start to take a look at other resources. And maps are really important. So the Sanborn Insurance Company maps, which were, earthquake, which were published, I think 7 times from 1887 to 1949, show footprints of buildings. And you can look at each of these maps and look at a particular building over time and see how it's changed on the exterior. You can see if a porch has been added or removed, or if there's a wing that's been added. Tells you a lot of great information. And the Sanborn maps are available both at the Atheneum in-house and at the NHA online. So, but I will let either Lincoln or Amelia tell you about the Sanborn maps because they work with those collections all the time too. And they're really fabulous. There are other great maps. Not all of them are available online, but you can order. I think Amelia will confirm this, that if you want a digital copy of some other important early maps that show footprints of buildings, you can get a copy of those. And there's just some great resources out there. But these 3 things will get you started: the GIS map, the Mass Land Records deeds, and the Sanborn Insurance Company maps. So I am going to turn this over to Lincoln now. He'll tell you about some of the resources that the Atheneum has. And then at the end of this whole session, if you have questions, I'll be happy to answer what I can. Thanks. So over to you, Lincoln.
Hi, folks. I'm Lincoln Thurber, the head reference librarian here at the Nantucket Atheneum Library. And I'd like to show you some of the resources that we have at the Nantucket Atheneum. I would probably think that many people would maybe start here. They might have questions about the house they're in or about a grandparent's house or something like that. They might have only a short amount of time or something like that. We have many visitors to the island. So we're sort of maybe a first stop for people, and then they might move on to much more in-depth research with people like Betsy or Amelia or any of the other organizations on island. So I have a little presentation So I'm going to share my screen. All right, so for this workshop, there's a few things I want to talk about. The Atheneum has many different types of material. Of course, what you would think of right off the bat is we have books on local history. So those include local histories of people and the places. We have encyclopedias that might talk about various subjects. We have local periodicals and government documents here. Some government documents you might only be able to get from the town of Nantucket, but we have some copies of things that will get you started. And of course, we hold the newspapers for the island from the 19th century all the way into the 21st century. So through that, we have the papers both physically, we have them as microfilm, and we have them as a database. And I'm going to show you parts of those throughout our talk. As far as other types of microfilms, we have mass vital records that might talk about people, ship's logs, and many other things. And then we have specialty databases. One of our premier ones is, of course, our historic database, but we also have genealogy things, which might help you with some parts of your house searches, and as well as databases. Betsy brought up the Sanborn Maps, and we have Sanborn Maps, as well as ancestry tools. So a starting point might be for somebody say, oh, at such and such an address, my grandfather used to live, or what have you. So how we would sort of start is we have many books that some of the other people here tonight will be showing you. But if it's a history of the island, we probably have it here. We also have the vital records from Massachusetts and New England that tells you about births, deaths, and marriages. We have access to historic Nantucket magazine, but of course NHA does as well. And then we do have books and genealogies that are specifically deposited here as well. So we can give a number of things. So looking through town records, one of the things I saw right off the bat was that, in regards to a town report, on a street list, we show who's living at 27 York Street at a certain period of time. And this comes from the 1975 street list. So we can see who's working there as well as the people and what they were doing. So early entry from something that we have on hand. The Nantucket Atheneum also has printed telephone directories. So we have those going from 1919 all the way to the present. So if someone says, oh, my father summered here and he was living at such and such an address, or he lived here for 3 years and I know he had a telephone, can we see maybe what that was or what the exact address is? He couldn't remember, but we can look you up in that way. And of course, we have the Higginbotham that first appears here in 1961 telephone book in the directory. So another kind of thing that we can bring you into. As far as newspaper articles, especially for house histories and things like that, we do try to clip the newspaper articles and have them ready on hand. We're actually going through a process of digitizing some of these items for quick reference as well. But if you walk in and you're interested in a particular street, we can actually give you a folder that has any house histories that were done on that particular street. And for this particular house, the Boston Higginbotham House, we actually had clipped about 4 or 5 articles that were ready for use. I'm just going to show you one of those articles as it appears electronically, and then I'll sort of show you what the difference is if you actually saw it from our clippings file. So this is a sample of the electronic version of it, and as you can see, we have a text-only representation of what the article was. And of course, it highlights what exactly you're looking for. But in some cases, that's really not what you want, especially for many of these house histories. There's lots of photographs. And we're actually working on getting electronic versions that keep the photographs in. But if you go to our clippings file, we have very nice representations of how the articles appeared, and we have information about where they were published and on what dates and things like that, as well as the imagery that goes along with it. And so the clippings file is still a very important aspect to some of the research when people come in. So we like to have those clippings files. And as you'll see when we go on to our historic Nantucket newspaper database, we do have the full printed parts of that. So I think that's the first thing I'm going to show you here is I'm going to show you how to get into and how to use the Atheneum's historic digital newspaper archive. So currently we're going from 1816 to 2016. We're going to be adding the next 3 years in the next few months. We're trying to get up to date with that. But if you come to the Nantucket Atheneum website, you come down here to reference, you open up a menu page. And the thing you want in this case is the historic digital newspaper archive. And so I'm in search. So I've put in 27 York. In some cases, you might want to put quotations around that. Otherwise, you're going to get every instance of 27 and every instance of York. So if we do this, and let's put a date range in here, say that we're looking for more recent things. So I'm going to start maybe in 1982, and I'm going to start on January 1st of 82. And we can stop on January 28th of this year, even though we don't have anything currently in there. We'll do a search. The search time can be a little bit lengthy. If you do put in a date range, that sometimes helps. And so what comes up is various articles. And it will show here that we found 19 results about 27 York, and it shows us the dates, and it tells us that we're looking at the first 10 results. So we can see kind of the paper, and we can also see the headlines. And we can go into any one of these. So if we click on this particular article, we can look at the presentation, but it also gives us the ability to see where it's highlighted on the actual page of the newspaper. So it'll kind of show us where the articles are on what we're looking at, and we can go in and see what we're looking for. Let's see. I'm guessing that it was one, yep, right here, discovering the house. So we can see here that this is talking about a particular time and place for looking at the history of the house, and there's going to be a presentation. You can also go back and look at any of the other results. So if there's particular things that you are desirous of looking for, like I said, you would put in a search. You can also add things to the search if you want to add terms as you go along. You can do that. And like I said, it's always good to maybe put a date range. That makes the searches a little bit quicker and a little bit more pinpointed towards what you're looking for. Certainly, if we want to change this and go very early, we can do that. So you can do January 1st, 1820. The other key thing is always remember when you put in a date to choose a month and a day. It actually does want you to sort of complete that part of the search by putting in a particular date, and you can go through the months and then choose date for the end date, do a search. Oh, 0 results. In some cases, a particular number on the house or something like that, 27, might not show up. In other cases, it could be that the paper, the quality of the paper or the text isn't that great. If you find that you know that there's a certain date where an article appeared, you can actually go straight into the paper itself. So I can choose a date, like 1870, and I can choose a month and a day, and it will show me the days here. So if I know something appeared on a certain date in a certain paper, I can actually go straight into that paper and take a look and read the articles. So that's a very handy thing to have when you're working on that. So let me switch out of this. I'm going to go back to my presentation. One of the other things we have is America's Genealogy Bank. This is also a handy resource that we get, and it's under our online databases and resources. So if you go in there, you'll see that we have a number of resources. And if you go into the Genealogy Bank, you can look at obituaries and historic newspapers and things like that. It works very much as Betsy was saying, where you just kind of fill in the blanks. So first name, last name, you can, because this goes across the entire United States, you can actually choose what state the newspaper occurred in. You can actually put in dates and things like that, and that will bring up material that it can find. We're actually going to be probably improving this database. This is particularly historic newspapers, and in some cases, they don't have the actual imagery of the paper. We're actually hoping maybe to improve that so that you can actually see the articles and in some cases, the photographs from at least the 20th century papers. So that's something that we're going to be working on. But again, this is a resource that we have here that allows you to look at newspapers outside of Nantucket, which is sometimes very handy for researchers here on the island as well. Boston Metropolitan Collection. Again, this gives us access to things like the Cape Cod Times, Independent, and it's a nice resource that we're going to expand upon. The other thing that I might do if someone's coming in to research a house or something like that, I might actually see what is in a union catalog. A union catalog is a catalog of catalogs. So if there's perhaps information that is not in our local library network, but outside of it, I can help do some searches for you to find materials. Right off the bat, I found some materials, and these ended up being dissertations online, one done at Berkeley, and these are available online. So if someone had requested something, I might be able to send them the link for this. This is actually a freely available dissertation here. And within it, it actually does have this nice map that's showing where the house was. And of course, this is a great article, dissertation about that particular time period and the people that live there. Next, I'm going to move on to the digital Sanborn Maps. We have those. It's a little bit different from the ones that the NHA holds. Our Sanborn Maps are only sort of accessible through library computers. So you actually have to be in here, which is kind of tough during COVID, but when we do open, they'll be available for people. And let me switch over just to make sure that we're seeing this particular screen. So this is the Sanborn Maps. And the nice thing about our collection of Sanborn Maps is we have all of Massachusetts. So if you want to choose a particular city, they're all in here, from the small towns to the big cities. So as far as Nantucket, we have it right here. And then you can also select a date, depending on sort of what you're looking for. So let's choose, let's go 1904. That might not be one. And the thing about the Sanborn Maps is that they always start, the first slide is something like this that kind of shows you which map you want to choose. So these big numbers here correspond to the sheet index here. So as we're seeing right here, supposedly on sheet 14, we should see York and Dover streets there. So I'm going to go down to sheet 14. It's here. I can move in. Of course, here it is right here. And we can see the church here. And our famous intersection here. You can zoom in very nicely just using your mouse on our particular one. One thing to be careful about is with some of these maps, especially when you go into the larger towns, they're not always north-south or east-west for the way you expect streets. This is a very nice one in that probably most of us looking at a map would probably understand this orientation or expect maybe this orientation. If you're taking imagery, if you want to print something and you want to kind of rotate the map so that it kind of fits sort of the landscape that you want to see, you can do that. You can turn it around even more if you're looking at different angles. You can use these to move in and out of the maps. The nice thing about the Sanborn Maps is that, especially for Nantucket, is that there's a good amount of detail on these. But what you will find is that between particular years, you may see more or less detail on a particular map. So if you're interested in a particular home, you might want to look through the selection of years just to see what might be available. Up here at the top, you can always switch towns or what map you're looking at. And again, each time you're going to want to come in and look at what map it should be that you want to be looking at. So in this case, I think it's 12 that it's going to want us to look at. And of course, you can come into 12 and look at that particular thing. Let me switch off of this, go back to my presentation. And of course, we might also point you towards freely available information that's online. There are real estate records online that show you present condition of a particular house. Of course, Betsy talked about the Nantucket GIS maps, and you can get into those. And as she explained, you can break out detail about the particular house and its history. And of course, there's always articles that have been written by Nantucket institutions about various places on the island. And of course, if you're in the library and you're doing your research, those are available for you to go to through your own research. So here at the Atheneum, we kind of look at it as maybe your first starting point for doing some of this research on a home or in a particular business. And we have some resources that are quite nice, especially in cases of business. The telephone directories often give you a nice look at what businesses were operating during certain years. And the newspapers are especially helpful for not only articles, but advertisements and court records and things like that. So with that said, I think I'm going to Amelia next, and she's going to talk about her materials.
Thanks, Lincoln. As Mary said at the outset, my name is Amelia Holmes, and I am the Director of Collections and Research Services here at the Nantucket Historical Association. So here at the Research Library at 7 Fair Street, I would say that two of our biggest kind of research questions from, not like outside of scholarship would be related to genealogy and to house histories. So with the whole island being a historic district, we just, people come here for all kinds of reasons, whether they're just wanting to know more about the history of their home, or whether they're real estate agents or architects looking to learn more about a property from a commercial aspect. So I was really excited to have the opportunity to share our resources with you tonight. And I kind of put things together just from the perspective of if someone reaches out to us, which is primarily via email these days, and says, I want to learn more about X property, how would we approach helping that person? So the first thing I want to share with you is just a few online resources. I'm going to share my screen with you. And we're going to start out here just on the NHA's homepage. So the first thing that we would do whenever someone says, tonight's example is 27 York Street. So if someone were to email us, we would start by searching the collections. So our catalog, so this has all of the artifacts, all of the photographs, books, manuscript materials, and maps are found here in the NHA's catalog. And so the easiest thing to do, you could start out by just typing in 27 York. And like Betsy was saying earlier, it's just easiest if you don't include street, because is it ST, is it STR, EET, like it just, if it's not there at all. So it's just easiest to take that approach. So you'll see here we've gotten 212 results, and like Lincoln was saying, that's because we're getting every instance of 27 and York. So the way to fix that, as he said, is to use the quotation marks, and that'll help us narrow down to a smaller, more accurate subset. So these are materials in the collection that are related to Florence Higginbotham, one of the previous owners of the house. So this, if you're doing your own house history research, this can be really exciting to see materials in the collection that are related to a property. In this case, we also have a number of photographs. Then you'll also be able to see what kind of reports we have in the collection, or if we have manuscript materials. You can also use this search if you know previous owners of the house, or if your house has a name. So like, for example, the name here is the past owners, but for example, if your house has a great name like Shenango, you can type that in and you'll be able to find the photographs and the materials we have related to that. So that would always be what I would say is the starting point, is to start with our catalog. So the next resource, I'm just going to touch on it briefly because Betsy wasn't able to screen share. These are the maps that Lincoln just talked about, but this is just the way that we're presenting them to the public, different from the Atheneum. So these are available. You don't have to be on site to see them, but there's just differences. The Atheneum has the whole state available, whereas the NHA is just the town of Nantucket. And the easiest way is to use Control F to bring up the little, I'm like showing you as though you're looking with me, I'll use my mouse. You can set up the little Control F to do the search, and you can do, York, and that'll bring you to all of the instances of York Street. And so it's the same feature, but I just wanted to show how you could access that on our website as well. The two external resources I wanted to share with you that we haven't touched on tonight. The first is the Historic American Building Survey, and this is a great resource even if you're wanting to do research for historic structures outside of Nantucket. These are, because this is a government resource, this was created by the government, there is no copyright, so they are available to download for free. So you'll want to go to the Library of Congress website, and we haven't said this, but I did want to just point out that we will be sharing a handout. We'll be able to make a little checklist of all of these points with the links available, and we can send them to the email address that you used to sign up for tonight's program. So please don't worry about remembering how exactly to get to the GIS map or the Sanborn Maps. We will help you there. So with HABs, we want to type in, I think it's easiest because this is the whole country. We want to type in Nantucket, and we can type in York. So for some of these resources, we didn't have something related to the 27 York Street. So some of these examples I'm going to point out tonight are for 29 York Street. But so for here, we do have a Historic American Building Survey for the African Meeting House, and these are just an incredible resource if you do have one for the property you're searching for. You'll see here, these are photos, photos of the property that you can view online. There are drawings of the property showing different plans of the structure. And then also there are these PDF data pages, and these are really great because scrolling down, you can get the historical information, what was known about the structure at the time the report was created. So the physical history, is there an architect? Do we know who that architect is? What events are associated with the structure? They do cite their sources, which as a librarian, I totally appreciate. And then their architectural information is included as well. And then they kind of tell you about how and when this was done. So this was done in 1967. So, these are definitely going to be, I mean, if you're in a newer part of the more recently developed part of the island, a newer structure, we're going to have a slightly fewer resources available for you. There's not going to be a 1967 HAB survey, but for many of the older buildings on island, there'll be reports available. So that's HABs. And the other external resource I wanted to share is Macaris. And so this is from the Massachusetts Historical Commission. So we're just going to click here, take a little peek. We're going to acknowledge that we have read this, but we will not be doing it now. And you just want to scroll down to Nantucket. Hitting the end button does not bring you straight down, so you really do have to scroll all the way down. You'll select Nantucket, and you want to just pick what part of the island. Why are you not? Oh, I bet it. I have not thought this through, but I can't click it because I'm screen sharing. Okay, so but we can do it without it. So that would just let you limit what part of the island, but how many York streets are there on Nantucket? So we can put in York and go to the next page. And now you're going to select building. So we're looking for a building. We want to add it to the list, and then we can just click next. Oh goodness me. So this is showing us all of Massachusetts. I feel like this is a flaw in the screen share situation, but when I practiced this multiple times earlier today, I got these 4 Nantucket results, which is what you will get doing this yourself. And so you can click on the record, Florence Higginbotham House. And so this gives you some information about the house, the year it was constructed. And what we want to click on, what makes this useful to us, is to click on this button here, so then we can just download the PDF report. And you can see here, this is the same information that we saw before, but now we can find this really great report that was prepared by our friend here tonight, Betsy Tyler, and Brian Pfeiffer. So this will just give us some more information about the architecture of the building, historical narrative, and so on. So these, and look at that, Registry of Deeds, Betsy's already done the research for us. So you can see this is just a really great resource. And these two, so I do want to say that these 2 types of reports are available they are available as hard copies in the research library, but you can see why this would be maybe easier for you to access online. So the other thing that I want to share with you tonight is just a few items that we have available to people here in the research library, that these are not available online. And so if you wanted to email us, if at this point the library is not necessarily open to the public in the way that we normally would be due to COVID, but we are able to work with people remotely. We're happy to check these resources for you and to send scans to people, and you know, in certain circumstances, also able to schedule appointments for, you know, socially distanced, certain number of people in the building, like a max, it would be you. So I just want to kind of touch on these. So the Architecture of Historic Nantucket is a really great resource by Clay Lancaster. This would be like the first place we would check after the catalog. And so we have available a copy here in the NHA's reading room, but also they are available to purchase secondhand online. And you can also check these out via CLAMS, via the public library system. So what makes this great is that Clay Lancaster has one portion of the book has a number of streets organized alphabetically. And York Street, and we'll flip the page, and you can see here 29 York Street, again 27 you can see is not here in the book. But if there is information in the book about your property, there will be just a couple of sentences about the structure, you know, just very concise, telling you about the architecture of this historic building on Nantucket. So always a great place to start. You know, he does provide like, oh, look, there's a HABS report, you know, so it can give you some little feeders to other resources. Other things you might have found this in the catalog, that we have a Preservation Institute Nantucket report. So that's the program through the University of Florida with historic preservation students. So that's you know, been happening on the island for decades, and all of these reports are cataloged. So if there has been research done into this, your historic property, you know, we would be able to find that report for you. We are able to scan those and send copies to people for reference and research purposes. And so you can see here, there is one, again, for the African Meeting House, but not for 27 York Street. So it really depends. You know, we have this wealth of resources available, but it's not necessarily going to be, you know, a home run for every option. And just kind of getting towards the end here, we have what are called blue files, and these are kind of similar to what Lincoln talked about earlier. I like to think of them as similar to like a Wikipedia page on a topic, in that they are a way to get a high level kind of familiarity on a topic. And so we do have street files where many of the streets, I think in town predominantly, but a few other streets as well, will have subject files, and they have clippings and research papers, other forms of ephemera. So we have here this this research, you know, this timeline compiled by Francis Cartoonan. It was done in 2004, and you can find this in our York Street file. So we would always want to check those for people, or were you here in person, you'd be able to check yourself. And the last kind of thing I wanted to talk about that we would check would be the Grace Brown Gardner clipping files. So she was associated with the NHA for a number of years. We have her scrapbooks, but she's also created these adorable little boxes where everything's organized alphabetically by street. And although we do have the incredible digitized newspapers resource, unparalleled in its usefulness, these do sometimes have articles that were not covered in the newspapers, but come from other sources. So always worth it to take a little quick peek to see if you might find something. And that's it for me. Those are all of the sources that I wanted to touch on that we haven't covered already tonight. So thank you.
Thanks, Amelia and Betsy and Lincoln and everybody. And I have my copy of Historic Architecture of Nantucket. One of many copies, as you could tell, maybe you could tell I'm in my house. So had to move some of those books from the office here, and it is definitely an invaluable resource. And I think that Nantucket, you know, it's a National Historic Landmark. It is of local and national importance. I think, you know, a lot of people are kind of surprised when they hear University of Florida. But yes, the University of Florida has been here for 50 years studying Nantucket, and it is a resource, you know, that's important to all of us who call it home, and to anyone that's interested in American history. So I just wanted to thank everybody here. And we've had a couple of questions come through the chat. I tried to answer if they were questions like folks looking for links. I tried to answer and post those links. So if you had a question looking for a link, you might already have been answered and can check that again. Like Amelia said, we'll be sending out a handout that has more of those links. There are a couple, this is a good question for Lincoln. And again, if you have any other questions, folks, please do put them in the Q&A, which is, why are the digital Sanborn maps only available at the Atheneum and not through the website? Like, why do you have to be physically there?
Unfortunately, because the database is, highly lucrative, the license we have for access to those maps only includes like a certain small amount of computers. So many of our databases are available for people using their Nantucket Atheneum library card or their clams card from home and things like that. Unfortunately, this particular database is a little bit more controlled, and so unfortunately it has to be on one of our registered machines.
Cool. Okay. Good answer. Will there be a replay? Yes, this is being recorded right now, and it'll be up on the NHA's YouTube page. Yeah, when it's done. Here's that's a great. Here's a really interesting question. Are there? I mean, they're all interesting, but the one I haven't thought of before, as someone who thinks about this all day. Are there available Realtor records of leases for summer visitors?
I don't know.
Not really, not that we know of, but as anybody who's looked through the newspaper can tell you, people used to say when they were coming to Nantucket. And, through certain periods of time, you might see, Mrs. Carroll is summering at Shenunga. So even if people weren't property owners, sometimes you can still find that information. Here's a question for Betsy. How to get past the first and only deed listed for the property on Mass Land Records site in order to see the past deeds?
Well, the deed, I'm not sure I understand this, but the deed I showed you, I pulled it up. If you read that deed, it refers you to the next oldest deed, and then you can type in that book and page number. I got that first deed number from the GIS map, and that's the deed book number, and that's how you get started looking through the Mass Land Records on that website. So you take the number from the GIS map, and then you look at the deeds, and then they'll give you other numbers until you run into a roadblock, like inherited from my grandfather. And then you have to do a little more digging.
Yeah. So it'll often say, this is the land that I bought from Betsy Tyler, and if you want to see Betsy Tyler's deed, go to book, blah, blah. So it all goes back and back and back, and it's okay, here's another one for Lincoln. How do you save the results of your search of newspapers?
The current system, there is a sort of a download and save button. I myself, when I'm doing research, I generally try to get the PDF copy. So instead of perhaps doing a print, I'll attempt to have it just sent as a PDF to myself. The other thing is you can actually email as you're going along and finding things. You can just have the link to that particular article emailed to you. It's a little bit easier to reference, and then from there you can see how best to gain something. There have been problems, and there probably still are problems with printing out from the newspaper. So it takes a little bit of effort. I do know that when you're printing something out, there are some tools that allow you to look at the print as actual size, and that's sometimes helpful when printing out, because very often the computer itself will attempt to just print out an enormous broadsheet article that goes, probably 20 inches down the page onto one piece of paper. So if you take it out of the one to fitting it to a page, it's a little bit easier to print out. And actually, the system we use and the company that we use, they're updating things all the time. And so in the next few months, we'll probably see another update coming out. And that might help with some of the teething that we've had for the past decade with this database itself. If you're having trouble, you can always give us a call, and we can give you kind of like directions over the phone as we're looking at it and you're looking at it as well. We're always happy to help.
Great. I like to print to PDF to keep the pages all stored up. Here's a good one too. And also, I know Lincoln answered this in the chat, but just want to say it for those who might not be looking at the chat, which is the question of, are there Nantucket Beacon newspaper archives? The Atheneum does have them, but it's on microfilm. So you would have to send a request and they can help you there.
Yep.
Cool. Are probate court records available online?
Is the short answer. And probate court records are a really fabulous resource, especially with older buildings, 19th and 18th century properties. When somebody dies and leaves a will, and sometimes there's an estate inventory, you can even see the furniture that was in the house and the value of everything. It's really quite fascinating. I mean, people generally had, a bed and a bolster and a clock and a couple pots, and it's minimalist living on Nantucket back in the day. But those are fascinating records. When the probate office is open, it's relatively easy to go in, and they have a card file of names, and it's easy enough to pull a probate record and look through it and see what you can find.
Great. A friend in the chat is saying that some probates are now on Ancestry.com. So
Good to know.
Good to know. These things, Betsy and I were just talking beforehand about a database I had only recently become familiar with. So I think as more and more people are getting interested in family history, and as more and more people are sitting in their homes, wondering about the people who might have endured the last pandemic that they might have been around for, people are thinking about house histories. What if a street number changes?
Uh-huh. That is really confusing. I know Orange Street, the numbers changed. If you're doing deed history, it's not. I mean, if you check the deeds, you know what the property is. But sometimes if you're looking for information like about 30 Orange Street and it was, had a different number at some point, it can be a little confusing. But there are ways to get back on track there.
Do you look at the descriptions of the property and match that up?
Yeah.
Here's a nice story. Julie says, I was able to find my great-grandfather's first marriage notice in the newspaper. He was married in Bureau County, Illinois. Thank you for showing me how to search with quotations for a more narrowed search. Yes, that definitely helps a lot. Here's one for Amelia. There are a number of glass plate photos in the NHA collection of the exterior of my house. What would be the best way to get the high-res copies of those?
Yeah, so we are always happy to help people with access our collection, including digital copies of our photos. If they want to email at library@nha.org, so just send in the photos that you're interested in or the number of your house, and we will get back to you.
Great. Did Nantucket renumber houses frequently? And are there any maps available online prior to the 1880s?
Oh, I would like to say that yes, there are. So the NHA has what I would humbly like to say is a really great map collection. We have over 600 maps, and we are working to digitize them and get them online. The two that come to mind as the best resources related to, beyond the Sanborn Maps, related to house history research would be the 1838 Coffin Map and the 1858 Walling Map, both of which are available through the catalog. So those have both been digitized. And so if you type in We'll have them on our checklist of resources, so don't worry about remembering them right now, but 1838 coffin, 1858 walling, and those are really nice because they show the location of buildings at those times. The 1858 walling map is particularly nice because it does show names associated with the owners of those properties at the time. So for example, we know where Arthur Cooper lived in 1858 because it does say A. Cooper on Angola Street. And I really do love the walling map because it is actually a very large wall map. And the section of Nantucket is, I mean, it's just like yay big, like, I don't know, a foot by a foot, but it is so densely packed with historically valuable information that it is a really great resource. So those would be the two that come to mind for me.
Also,
Yeah.
the bird's eye view, 1881, is one
That's
of my
beautiful.
favorites.
Yes.
That's a great map. Yeah.
Oh, good. Thanks. Yeah, thanks for mentioning that one. And I think that if that's not, yes, that is available online through our catalog as well. So definitely feel free to check out the map collection. And we're also generally happy to scan. If you kind of are searching along and you see something that you think might be useful to you, but it's not available online, you should still reach out anyway, because we are, again, working to get that collection digitized.
I know that we are a little over time. I'm thrilled that so many people joined and stayed on for so long. Do property owner records go back to the 10 founding individuals of the island, the proprietors?
Do they what?
Do the property records go all the way back to the proprietors of the island?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the amazing thing is the property records at the Registry of Deeds go back to 1659. And some of those early ones, you would be very challenged to read, but they are, you know, they're there. They're in bound volumes and they're fascinating. And then there are separate books of proprietors' records as well, because the proprietors would meet regularly and distribute land sometimes, or make decisions about where to plant the corn that year, or, you know, what the bounty is on a crow. So there's some fascinating information in those records too. They're in the Registry of Deeds office.
How do you get to the how do you get to the place where you put in the deed numbers on the Mass Land Records site? I only saw the place for first and last names.
Go to search criteria in the top left corner, and there's a little drop down menu, and you'll see recorded land and registered land. Recorded land is what you want to use for 27 York and for most of the older properties in town. So there's a choice of book. So click on book, and then you'll see a search box for book and page, and you can search that way. The land court, the registered land, that's another kettle of fish. The land court was established in 1925, I think, somewhere around there. And property that's been certified through the land court is classified a different way. In a nutshell, that's what that is.
Great. Yeah. Well, everybody, it has been so great chatting with you all, and my email is, I wish we had a slide with all of our emails, because there are a couple of questions that are coming up, but you know, what could I say? Amelia, when she sends out the list, will include everybody's email.
Oh, look at you. Yeah, I will.
And there we go. So if you have some questions, I know there's some property specific questions that we haven't really had a chance to get into, but that would be, you know, I know we're all happy to help. So if we didn't get a chance to your question, I was trying to go for the more general ones, but we'd be happy to help you out. And thanks again to Novation Media and to everyone who was involved in this and who attended. And we hope you have a great rest of your evening. And we'll see you in the deeds online. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.